You know how we're always digging into those stories behind the stories? We'll get this. This time, we're going deep on abortion
At the
access.
twist.
Yeah, you could say that. We're talking mail delivery surveillance and drug-sniffing dogs.
It sounds like we're making this up right,
Mm-hmm.
but this is real, playing out right now. And it highlights some pretty unsettling trends, not just in reproductive rights, but digital privacy and law enforcement, too.
Seriously, when that article from The Intercept landed on my desk, drug-sniffing police dogs are intercepting abortion pills in the mail, I was floored.
The Intercept, gotta love them, always digging where others don't.
Exactly. So before we even get into it, what was it about this particular story that screamed deep dive to you?
I mean, it's one of those where the more you learn, the less clear anything becomes, and that's always a good sign there's more to uncover. Plus, it shows how these separate issues we think about, abortion access, the Postal Service, police dogs, they're all tangled up in this.
Okay, so setting the scene. It all starts in Jackson, Mississippi, December 2022. What happened?
Picture this.
Yeah.
You're a postal worker, right? And you start noticing a pattern, someone's sending out these pink envelopes. Bunch of them all look the same. Maybe it's nothing, but we're in a post-Roe world now. Suspicions get raised.
And those suspicions lead to...
A K9 unit being brought in to sniff out the packages.
Okay, yeah, I see where this is going, but it gets weirder, right?
You bet. The dog, Rip, he signals for narcotics. But here's the thing. The pills inside, they were mifepristone and misoprostol. Those are for medication abortions. Not illegal, at least not federally.
Hold on, if the pills themselves are fine, why'd the dog go off? And how are the feds even involved in this? I thought abortion was a state issue now.
Million-dollar questions, both of them. The article throws out a couple ideas.
Yeah.
One is this whole cross-contamination thing. Think about how these pills are made, packaged. Even a tiny bit of something the dog's trained on, it could set it off.
Like accidentally setting off a store alarm because you got too close, but with way higher stakes.
Exactly. And then there's the handler. Right. Even if they don't mean to, they can give subtle cues to the dog, totally unconsciously, and that messes with how the dog behaves.
So we don't even know if the dog was reacting to the pills or just picking up on the handler's vibe. That's a little unnerving.
It does make you wonder how reliable these searches really are, especially in a situation like this. But to your point about the feds, yeah, that's where it gets even more complicated. The article mentions this group, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, USPIS.
Okay, hold up. USPIS, that's the mail cops, right? Like if someone mails a bomb or something.
That's them. Now, they say they don't care about enforcing state abortion laws, which, fair enough. But they are responsible for stopping illegal drugs being shipped. And that's the issue, because more and more we're seeing these foreign-made abortion pills.
Because then it gets blurry what's medicine and what's contraband, even if it's basically for the same purpose.
Exactly. And we know from the article that these pills, they were labeled anti-preg kit, came from India. FDA hasn't approved bringing those kinds in.
So even though the pills themselves aren't necessarily a no-go, this specific detail makes it legally iffy, like they're in some legal loophole.
You could say that. And this is where it gets even trickier, because the article mentions this website, Plan C. Have you heard of it?
Oh yeah, Plan C. Okay, for those who don't know, can you give us the lowdown on that and why it's relevant here?
So they're basically a hub. They don't sell the pills themselves, but they point you to places that might, often through the mail. Since Roe v. Wade got overturned, they've become really important for a lot of folks.
Because if clinics are struggling, people in states where it's restricted or outright banned, they're going online, going international.
And this case in Jackson shows how the authorities are trying to navigate this new reality.
Which, frankly, is kind of terrifying. We're talking about people's lives, their health care, caught in this legal tug of war. And it wasn't just those few envelopes, right? The article made it sound like this blew up.
Oh yeah, we're not talking small potatoes here. Throughout that December, USPIS snagged over 7 dozen envelopes with these pills, all because of that initial tip about the pink envelopes.
70 dozen. That's wild. That's not just one person's story. That's potentially dozens of people whose access just got cut off.
And this is where it gets even more unsettling, because the article hints at them using this thing called a mail cover.
Mail cover. Sounds like something out of a spy movie. What is that?
So basically, they photograph every single piece of mail, everything that goes through the system, letters, packages, the whole shebang.
Hold on, they're taking pictures of everything. Why? How is that even legal?
It's been around for a while. Law enforcement uses it, but how it started and what they do with it now, that's a bit murky. Officially, they need a warrant to see what's inside your mail, but this loophole, it lets them collect tons of metadata.
Metadata, so like the sender, the recipient, that kind of thing.
Yep. And this is where it gets really big brothery. With all the tech we have now, digital tracking, data analysis, mail covers become way more powerful. They're basically putting your mail under a microscope.
And they were doing that in Jackson with the abortion pills.
That's what it seems like. That's how they found all those other envelopes. Makes you think twice about just how much they're watching, especially when it comes to something like reproductive health care.
Okay, so we've got potentially unreliable dog searches, this whole international legal gray area, and now mass postal surveillance.
Don't forget the antiquated law that could make things even more complicated.
Oh, right. The Comstock Act. That's a thing from like the 1800s, right? That can't still be relevant, can it?
Buckle up, the Comstock Act,
Yeah.
1873. And it could make mailing anything obscene, lewd, or lascivious, even articles of immoral use illegal. Guess what could fall under that?
You're kidding. Something from the horse and buggy days could affect abortion access now.
As crazy as it sounds, yeah. And certain anti-abortion groups are pushing hard for it to make a comeback.
So even if a state's cool with abortion, the feds could swoop in with this old law and cause trouble.
Ding, ding, ding. And the Jackson case, even though it didn't use the Comstock Act directly, it's like a warning shot, shows how this could all play out, like a legal ticking time bomb.
My head's spinning. State laws, federal agencies, laws from before electricity. This is a tangled web.
And it gets even stickier. The Comstock Act isn't just about the pills themselves. We're talking anything abortion-related, right? Surgical tools, pamphlets, even stuff used to make the pills.
So even shipping totally legal medical supplies to a state where abortion's A-okay could land someone in hot water.
You got it. And think about the ripple effect.
Yeah.
Clinics, even in states where it's protected, they might be scared to order supplies through the mail, just in case.
It's like they're trying to shut it all down, even where it's allowed.
It's not just about restricting access in one place. It's about using these federal laws, these agencies, to make it harder everywhere, to make people afraid.
This is already giving me legal whiplash, and it feels like we're just getting started.
Well, we're just getting warmed up.
All right, well, before we really go down that rabbit hole, let's take a quick pause. We'll be back to untangle more of this and talk about what it all means for the future of reproductive health care. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so we're back, and wow, there's a lot to unpack here. State laws, federal agencies, laws from before cars were even a thing, and even the possibility of our mail being watched.
It's a lot to process, and it's easy to get lost in the legal back and forth. But I think the article does a good job of reminding us that this isn't just a theoretical debate. We're talking about real people's lives here.
Yeah, and the article did mention that this case in Jackson, it eventually went to the U.S. Attorney's Office there, but then it just kind of disappeared.
Well, not exactly disappeared, but it does highlight how politically sensitive this whole issue is. According to the article, in the end, nobody was actually charged with anything. The retired USPIS inspector who was on the case even said he thought the political climate made it a hot potato nobody wanted to touch.
So a win, maybe, but a small one. It doesn't mean it couldn't all happen again tomorrow, right?
Exactly. Those legal mechanisms are still there. The power struggles between the states and the feds are still there, and the Comstock Act is still looming.
Which, speaking of the Comstock Act, we've mentioned it a few times now. What was the deal with that law anyway? It's ancient history, but was it always about controlling women's bodies and their health care?
That's a really good question, and it shows how laws can be twisted and turned over time to fit different agendas. See, back in the 1870s when the Comstock Act first came about, it was all about stopping the spread of stuff they thought was obscene. Back then, that included anything about contraception or abortion.
So even back then, reproductive health care was considered off limits.
Oh, yeah. Anthony Comstock himself, he was the postal inspector who really pushed for this law. He was really against anything he saw as immoral, kind of like the Victorian era's version of a censor, Aronica. He used the postal service to control what people could get in the mail.
Wow, that is some serious irony. So they might actually use a law from the 1800s to control access to health care in the 21st century. It seems crazy.
It does, but it's not that surprising when you think about it.
Yeah.
Throughout history, people have tried to control women's bodies and their choices, and it often comes with censorship, with trying to shut down information.
And now with the internet, something like the Comstock Act could be even scarier, right?
Totally. Think about all the information that flies around online. If they wanted to, they could use the Comstock Act to go after websites, forums, even personal emails.
Wow. It's like this old law that seemed kind of irrelevant suddenly has teeth in the digital age.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, and it shows how quickly things can change, how something we might think is settled can be thrown up in the air again.
And that uncertainty, that fear of suddenly being on the wrong side of the law, it's got to have a real impact on people who are just trying to access healthcare.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so concerning. It's not just about whether or not someone gets prosecuted under the Comstock Act. It's about the chilling effect it creates.
Meaning clinics get scared to order supplies, doctors might not even talk about all the options with their patients because they're worried about legal trouble.
Exactly. It creates this climate of self-censorship
Mhm.
where people are afraid to even look for information or get the care they need because they don't want to get in trouble with the law.
We've talked a lot about the law, but this has to be taking a toll on people who need reproductive health care. In the article, they talked to this advocate, Lori Bertram Roberts, right?
Yeah, Lori Bertram Roberts, they have this organization in Mississippi. They do incredible work helping people get access to reproductive health care. They've seen firsthand how these restrictions, how this climate of fear, it really hurts marginalized communities the most.
When we say marginalized communities, we're talking about people who already have a hard time getting health care, right?
Absolutely. People with low incomes, people of color, people in rural areas, they get hit hardest by these kinds of restrictions. They often don't have the money to fight legal battles or to travel really far to get care. It's already tough, and then these laws make it even harder.
So it's like these laws, whether it's the overturning of Roe v. Wade or this possible comeback of the Comstock Act, they just make things even more unequal.
Unfortunately, that's often the case. And when we talk about reproductive justice, we have to talk about making sure everyone has equal access. It's about making sure that everyone, no matter who they are or where they live, can make decisions about their bodies and their lives.
And Lori Bertram Roberts, their organization, that's what they're fighting for, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what they said in the article, it really stuck with me. They said that making it a crime to get an abortion doesn't actually stop abortions from happening. It just makes them less safe.
Which is just awful. It's like we're going backwards instead of forwards. So
Yeah.
where do we go from here? It feels like a huge problem without any easy solutions.
It is complicated. But just knowing about this, understanding what's happening, that's a good first step.
Knowledge is power, right? But it can't just be about feeling bad. We need to do something. What can people actually do about this?
You're right. We need action. Luckily, the article has some good suggestions.
Okay. What can our listeners do?
Well, they talk a lot about digital privacy. We've already talked about mail covers, but digital surveillance is a whole other can of worms. It's really important to know what information websites are collecting about you, how they're storing it, and what they could potentially do with it.
So we've talked about learning more ourselves, telling of other people about it, supporting the groups who are actually doing the work, and then using our voices voting, talking to our representatives. What else? It feels so big. Are there smaller things, everyday things that actually make a difference?
It's a good question, and you might be surprised. Sometimes the most impactful things are the ones right in front of us.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What do you mean? Like, what can we do in our own lives that actually matters here?
The article touched on this briefly. Local abortion funds. Have you heard of them?
I've heard the name, but to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on what they actually do.
So these are groups, often really grassroots, run by people in the community. And they help with the real life stuff, the practical hurdles people face trying to get an abortion.
Like what kinds of hurdles?
Think about it, even if you can legally get an abortion. There's travel, maybe you need a place to stay overnight, childcare. Those things add up fast, especially in a post-Roe world where you might have to travel further for care.
Right. It's not just about the procedure itself. It's all the stuff around it. And that's where these funds come in.
Exactly. They might help with travel costs, accommodation, all that. But they also offer more than just money. They might connect people with transportation networks, help them figure out the legal maze if they're crossing state lines for care. Real hands-on support.
It's like they're a lifeline for people who are already in a tough spot. But these groups, they probably run on a tight budget, right?
You're telling me. They rely so much on donations, and often it's small amounts from individuals that keep them going. Even $5, $10, it can help someone afford the bus fare to a clinic or a meal while they're traveling.
So listeners, if you're looking for a way to really make a concrete difference, find your local abortion fund and give what you can. We'll link to some resources in the show notes. What about beyond money? Can people help out in other ways?
Absolutely. A lot of these funds need volunteers. Could be answering phones, could be driving folks to appointments, anything you can do, honestly.
So even if someone's not in a place to give financially, they can donate their time, their skills, even just their energy to the cause.
100%. Every bit of support matters. And I think that's the thing to remember here. It's not just on one person to fix this. It's about all of us. It's about creating this network, this community that can push back against all these attacks on reproductive rights.
Because that sense that we're not alone, that we're in this together, that's got to be so powerful, especially when things feel so overwhelming.
Absolutely. And that's a really important note to end on, I think. Yes, this is complicated. Yes, it's scary. But there are people out there fighting their hearts out for reproductive justice, and we can join them.
So well said. This has been eye-opening, to say the least. It feels like we've just scratched the surface of this whole hidden battle over reproductive rights. But by talking about it, by learning, by taking action, we can make a difference.
They can. It's not hopeless, not at all.
Exactly. Whether it's giving what you can to an abortion fund, volunteering your time, calling your representatives, or even just having honest conversations with the people you know, every single thing we do adds up. Knowledge is power, but action. That's where real change happens.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, from those sniffing dogs and pink envelopes all the way to laws from 100 years ago and the government watching our mail. But the message is clear. This fight for reproductive rights, it's more important now than ever. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep fighting the good fight. Until next time, stay curious.